Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We're here today to talk about some very important legislation, and many of you have maybe talked about this already or have written about it yourselves. We've seen many articles about people faking service animals. You see people bringing their kangaroo into McDonald's or emotional support peacock onto an airplane or whatever it may be. And that's really unfortunate because it really affects people in the disability community that really have real needs with service animals. So it really amazes me that we're even here today to have to talk about this legislation because people are taking advantage of a system that's, again, intended to aid the daily life of disabled Minnesotans. And when people misrepresent their animals, they damage the reputation and acceptance, which is an important piece, of valid service animals and diminish people with disabilities who truly need them. This legislation would make impersonating a service animal a petty misdemeanor for the first offense and a misdemeanor for subsequent offenses. And if enacted, Minnesota would join 20 other states that currently have laws on the books about this. So this is an important step for people in our communities and something that many of us are very concerned about. I'm going to hand it over to Representative Green, who's the House author of a similar bill, and then we're going to have Senator Rust speak on this as well. So I'm going to hand it over to Representative Green.
Thank you, everyone, for showing up today. This is an important issue. This was brought to me by a lady who had her service dog had to be put down because it was attacked by a fake service dog. I've been working on this legislation for over a year to try to get the language right. I think that we've got a pretty good bill here in front of us, a really good bill here in front of us. We have bipartisan support. Thank you, Senator Rest. And we're gonna move forward with this. I appreciate the press coming here to move this forward. I think we're going to get a lot of input from the local people and people around the state on this, and it's a huge issue. We have some other folks here with service dogs that would like to testify as well. So thank you for coming, Senator Rest.
Well, thank you very much, Representative Green. It really has been a privilege to work with Senator Eichhorn and Senator Utke on the bill in the Senate. And I think it is an example that when we put our heads together, we can come up with bipartisan support for a single concept and produce a better bill as a result of that. And I'm really happy that Senator Eichhorn is carrying the bill, and I'm very happy to support him in his efforts. Last April, I was meeting with Mr. Al Peters, who you'll hear from in just a moment, on these issues, and we were working on a bill to deal with the same issue of misrepresenting animals and what should be the consequence of doing that for misrepresenting them as service animals. Since that time, I've also heard from building owners, restaurant owners, grocery store owners, any place where there is a public accommodation about liability issues. That is, if a dog comes in misrepresented as a service animal and does some sort of damage either to another person or to the building itself or whatever, that the owner, believing in good faith that he was admitting a service animal into the establishment, should not be held liable. That's not the person who should be sued. The person who brings the animal into that accommodation should be the responsible party. And so we have joined together in supporting that bill as well, and are presenting today a single unified approach and bill to the Judiciary Committee. So I thank you all for being here. Can Do Canines, where Mr. Peters is the executive director. I am extremely pleased and proud, is located in New Hope, which is my hometown and my district. So without further ado, Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Senator. Can Do Canines is in support of all of the legislation that's been put forward. We're so thrilled. We started with Senator Rust, and we're thrilled to find out that multiple senators and representatives were bringing the legislation forward. This is a huge problem for people with disabilities. Having fake dogs enter public places distracts our dogs, causes them to not be able to do their jobs properly. In some cases, as you heard, can actually destroy the use of with an assistance dog. A service dog can be quite expensive to train, and having these fake dogs, these imposters in public is a disaster for our clients. I believe that some of the people who are doing this think that this is a victimless crime. They think it's okay to fool the system a little bit and bring their dog on an airplane or bring their dog into a restaurant or a hotel or whatever. But the fact is that it's not a victimless crime. It is a serious crime. Pretending that your service dog that your dog is a service dog has far-reaching negative impact for people with disabilities. It's inappropriate, it's immoral, and we want to make it clearly illegal with this legislation. My clients are adversely affected on a regular basis, and I think hearing from them is probably the most helpful thing for you, because they are the ones that are affected. It's important to realize that these laws were designed not to protect dogs. Dogs don't have access. People with disabilities have access. And every time one of these imposters pretends that they're somebody with a disability, they're hurting the individuals who need the help, the people with disabilities. So thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
You have to introduce them.
Sorry, this is Terry Craik. Terry Craik is one of our graduates. She is paired with a mobility and seizure assist dog, Brody.
Thank you all very much. Brody's hidden now. Sit, Brody. I am very much in support of these bills, both in the House and in the Senate. We run into these fake dogs, if not daily, 3 times a week. They're lunging, they're barking, they're misbehaving, and it can distract our dogs. Luckily for me, I've had Brody 8 years, so when he sees a dog doing that, he just looks at them like they're stupid, and we keep on going. But we've run into people that put their dogs in baby carriages, people that put their dogs in what you guys call carts. Down south we call them buggies, and they have mail order capes, and they lunge and they bark and they distract the dogs, and they're unmerciful. Their owners can't get them to be quiet. To me, that's not a service dog. We've had dogs that had fake capes go into Target. I've visually watched them, and they urinated on an end cap in Target. If that was a service dog, it should immediately be removed, because all our dogs are trained not to do that. And there is a lot of training that goes into place for these service dogs before we even get them. And so it's kind of it ruins what the service dog organization has done to train these dogs for us by having these imposters. And I think that, alert, or at least including businesses and making them aware of the fact that they can say no to a dog that's barking or has been a customer. That's okay to say no, get out. And if it's a service dog and they do that, they need to get out too. And I train Minneapolis police on service dog awareness, and I tell them, you have to be aware of the demeanor of the animal. If the dog is behaving like Brody or Dazzle here, they're okay to be in that place. But when the fakers come in because they think it's cute to put a little fake vest that costs them $25 online, and they walk in with a flexi leash on their dog, letting their dog sniff, bite groceries, things like that, our dogs do not do that. And so I have trouble with business owners saying, well, this is a restaurant and we really don't want to have your dog because we had this dog the other day eat out of a lady's plate. Our dogs do not do that. Our dogs are under down like he is right now, and they behave, and you won't hear a peep out of them. So these other dogs are making my life difficult. What could be a 10-minute walk into Target turns into 45 minutes because I've got to go around where the fake dog is. And it's just becoming really, really hard and stressful on me. So I have lots of friends that have service dogs, and we're all experiencing the same thing. So I think these bills are important. I think that when you see a business and a business says service dogs are allowed, they need to say we also do not allow fake service dogs and have a statute there. And then they take care of the fakers, because we got to stop them. In the last 3 years, it's multiplied 10 times more than when I first got Brody. And it's making my life very, very difficult.
How long have you had Brody?
I've had Brody 8 years.
And say your last name for
It's Crake, K-R-A-K-E. Crake. It's like Drake with a K. And Brody is B-R-O-D-Y. He's the rock star. Okay. Come on, people.
Sorry, Terry, how do you spell your first name?
T-E-R-R-I.
I'd like to invite Beth Cantor to come up, and she's with her assistance dog, Dazzle, who is a mobility service dog.
And what breed he is.
Oh.
Dazzle is a smooth-coated collie. Most people ask that question because most people don't know what a smooth-coated collie is, and I didn't either. Dazzle and I have been a team for 6 years. She's 8 years old, and I got her from Can-Do Canines. I have multiple sclerosis, and oftentimes I don't always walk with a cane, and so I have a fairly invisible disability. So when I walk in with Dazzle, hey, come, under, down, down, down. Good. When I walk in with, she has to go to the bathroom, sorry. When I walk in with a service dog, a lot of times people with a fake service dog who's gone in before us have been there, and they don't know why I have my dog. I don't have an obvious disability. So people really legitimately question why I have a dog. The FDA has set up already, ADA has set up already laws in place for people to ask questions. That's all set up. The laws are in place. We just don't have legislation in Minnesota to back these laws, and that's why I'm very much for these laws to pass today. We need backup. The moral compass is gone from people regarding people wanting to bring their dogs out. I get it. People are dog lovers. They want to bring their dogs out. I love my dog too, but my dog is there because I medically need her. People want to bring their dog with in purses and in strollers, and it's easy for them to do now. The internet, I looked up today, you can buy a vest for $6, and you can buy a service dog for less than 50 cents. I kind of hate to say that on TV, but that's the way things go now, and they get to bring their dog out. And since there isn't a moral compass, there needs to be, frankly, there needs to be a legal compass. There needs to be litigation and able to back us up. I get told every day that I'm lucky that I get to bring my dog with me. I am lucky that I have Dazzle, but I have a disability, and it wasn't a choice that I got to bring my dog with. It's a necessity. It's a problem, and it's sad that the wants of people interfere with the need of my ability to really function in this world. I thank you, and I agree. It's really sad that there has to be legislation on this, but there does. And I just thank you guys for bringing this forward. Thank you.
As well as giving legal consequence to our clients, this law will hopefully bring enough publicity forward that people who are doing this will be embarrassed to do it, that their families and their friends will look at them and say, what are you doing? Why would you do this, and why would you take advantage of the rights that were hard fought for people with disabilities only to have your pet accompany you today for this one event? So we're hoping that public opinion is going to be just as powerful as the law here, but the law is absolutely necessary to make that happen. So questions?
We heard Ms. Craig in the committee today testify that behavior is the only way to really prove that your dog's a real service dog, so there's no certification or some type of paperwork that people can carry with them to show the police?
We certify our dogs. Our dogs receive a cape, they receive an identification card, but that's something that's done by our organization based on the fact that we're part of Assistance Dogs International. We are a well-known organization that has an accreditation through that organization. But there is no formal law or license. If a dog is trained to help somebody with a disability, they're permitted to go into public places. That's the way the Americans with Disabilities Act reads. So merchants can ask two very simple questions. They can ask what the dog is trained to do, and what's the other question? what the dog's trained to do, and
Is this dog for a disability?
is the dog trained to help with a disability? They can't ask the client or the person if they're disabled. They can't ask about their disability. So they can only ask those questions. And if the person lies, they have to be accepted. They have to be let in. But they are impacting the rights of every disabled person. There are thousands of people with assistance dogs that are being impacted because the public can't tell the difference between a fake dog. I mean, we can tell the difference because we know that those dogs aren't behaving right in public, but they can't tell the difference between a fake dog and a well-trained assistance dog on first glance. So every time their dogs misbehave, it makes our dogs look bad. And that's what's got to stop.
So could you talk about what enforcement would look like? You know, if you're talking about people go into a Target, I could go online right now on Amazon and buy a vest without needing proof. So what would that look like to actually crack down on this?
Buying the vest is a whole different setup. That's enforcing laws that probably aren't written yet, and it is probably national, and it's internet-based problem. So that's a different issue. Once the law is passed, if somebody sees a dog misbehaving, they can call the police department and say, this dog doesn't belong here. It also will hopefully raise consciousness. Merchants are now afraid to ask if a dog is an assistance dog or not, or service dog or not, because they're afraid they're going to get sued. Plenty of merchants have. So they're afraid to ask. But they need to be able to do that. They need to be able to ask, especially when a dog's misbehaving. As Terry mentioned, any dog that's misbehaving, whether it's a service dog or not, if it's not acting properly in a public place, it can be asked to leave. The person can't be asked to leave. They're asked to take their dog out of the business. And that's a legitimate thing to do. We want that because our dogs are being well behaved. It's the dogs that aren't being well behaved that need to leave.
Has other similar legislation in other states been successful? And can you give an example? Yeah.
There's about 20 states that have done various kinds of legislation. I unfortunately don't know if it's been successful. I don't know exactly how to measure that. We probably have to survey each state and see what they know, but even then, who knows for sure. I think the fact that state after state is doing this, and I'm glad to have Minnesota joining the pack, is a good step forward. And I think eventually we'll have federal legislation that'll give us a consistent rule or a consistent system. But right now we don't have that.
What about people who say they have emotional support dogs?
Emotional support dogs are nice, friendly animals that make people feel good. They are not assistance dogs or service dogs in the legal sense under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Those dogs are not trained to perform a function that mitigates the person's disability, and that's the requirement. The dog has to be trained to mitigate one or more symptoms of a person's disability in order to be called a service dog.
How do you address that confusion, though, between emotional support dogs and service dogs when emotional support dogs are allowed on airplanes under a different set of rules?
Unfortunately, airplanes do have a different set of rules. The FAA has allowed comfort dogs, or what do you call those? Emotional support dogs on airplanes, which is really unfortunate. I think it's extremely dangerous for passengers. I certainly wouldn't want to be on a plane with a dog that's not trained to handle that type of experience. I'm sorry, I didn't
No,
mean
you're fine. I was actually going to piggyback on one of those other questions, but to the point we're already on, there just another article recently about somebody that brought their emotional support dog on a plane and bit a young child. So, I mean, these are things that are going to have to be addressed at the federal level. Obviously, we're not going to be addressing airlines in this proposal. It's going to be within the state of Minnesota, but there is something to help business owners. There is a definition of what the notice should be within the bill, and it's going to read, service animals are welcome. Notice we say service animals, not assistance animals. If you have an assistance animal, somebody may take that to be their emotional support animal. So we're talking about legitimate service animals are welcome, and it is illegal for a person to knowingly misrepresent an animal in that person's possession as a service animal or a service animal in training. The bill also goes on to say that the Council on Disability may prepare and make available to businesses a brochure and detailing permissible questions. That's the other piece of this. Hopefully it allows this discussion to go forward and allows some education of this as well for business owners, because we see that a lot of this happens obviously in public spaces and in areas where there are business owners or managers of businesses that will end up ultimately addressing some of these concerns. They're able to point to a sign, they're able to point to a law. So there is that education piece, and you guys all being here today covering this is helping that education piece, so we appreciate that.
I would also just point out that we just mentioned as part of Senator Eichhorn's remarks about the number of states that already have legislation. Well, we're not the only one that's considering it now as well. Washington State has taken up a similar bill dealing with the fraudulent representation and has passed one house completely and is now in front of the other body there. I think we're going to see it across the country. This is not a Minnesota-centric issue. It is across the country. And I think that the notice provisions that are in Senator Eichhorn's and Senator Ucke's original bills are really good ones because they tell the public this is the kind of dog that can enter this establishment. Otherwise, you are committing a crime. And people need to know that. It's a crime. It's going to be a crime under Senator Eichhorn's bill. But it's happening everywhere, not just in Minnesota.
Some of the pushback in committee today was about the notion of creating a new crime or a new category of crime rather than addressing it through trespassing or other existing laws. What's the problem with trying to use existing laws?
Well, and I might let Representative Green address that a little bit more, but the way I see it, and we did talk with the interested party in that, and if you go to the trespass law, you end up in a situation where that individual who's faking their service animal can trespass at 6, 8, 10 different places and never end up in trouble. And then are we really solving the issue at hand here? I think not really. We may see that same question come up in our committee, and I'll let Representative Green address what happened in his committee today. But I don't think the trespass going with that current law is going to address our issue. And there are some concerns from the disability community that isn't far enough, that having this new language is what's really going to take care of the issue for us. I'll turn it over to Representative Green again.
Thank you, Senator, and I guess you pretty much said it all. The trespass law we don't believe will work. And we ran out of time in committee today, and legal aid was fighting on the bill. But again, I want to stress that this isn't something that we just popped together. I've been working on this a long time, trying to stay in compliance with ADA and trying to get something that we could put forward to our businesses to give them the tools that they need to assess the animals that are out there and shouldn't be. So with that, I think that we get some more time in committee again. I think we'll resolve those problems. This is a good bill and it needs to move forward.
Can someone tell me how much a service animal costs on average, and does the person who's utilizing those services then pay that, or how's that taken care of?
It varies greatly with organization. In our case, it costs more than $25,000 to train an assistance dog, but we provide the dog free of charge to the person who needs it. Some organizations sell their dogs or charge certain fees or require fundraising. Guide dogs can cost as much as $100,000, a guide dog for a blind person. So they are quite expensive, quite valuable, and but they can only make a difference for people if they're allowed into public places to accompany people.
How is it that your organization can provide them free of charge?
We made a commitment.
Is that what?
I started the organization 30 years ago, and I made a commitment to making sure that everybody who needed an assistance dog could have one. And you can't do that if you expect them to pay $30,000 or $25,000 or whatever the cost is, because most people with disabilities have limited incomes, sometimes no incomes. And so the way to do that is to take people one at a time and provide the dogs that they need free of charge. That's our opinion, but it's not consistent across the industry.
Has any objection been raised that by someone perhaps who doesn't have access to a service animal, whether it be for emotional support or whatever, that they simply don't have access to it and therefore they're bringing their own animal in? Is there a backlog, or are there requests that are unable to be filled? There are people who legitimately need service animals.
There are definitely more requests than there are animals. We have 180 some people on our waiting list right now, and we'll probably train 50 assistance dog teams, human and dog teams this year. So the waiting list is definitely there for a free dog. And that does create a demand. There's more of a demand, but again, people can't afford to spend the kind of money that it costs to do this properly.
Well, what I'm driving at is that might some then say that you're choking off the ability of some who need these animals, albeit not trained animals. I understand that, and I understand the drawbacks to having an untrained animal, but some who might say, I really need this, the waiting list is too long, I'm sorry, but I gotta have to have this animal for emotional support or for whatever.
The Americans with Disabilities law says that the dog has to be trained to mitigate the symptoms of a disability. It doesn't say who trains the dog. You can train the dog yourself, you can hire a trainer, you can go to obedience classes and accomplish the mitigation on your own if you want to. It doesn't have to be trained by an organization like ours. But most of the people we serve don't have the wherewithal to do the level of training, and we spend 2 years preparing these dogs so that they're bomb-proof when they go out in the public, and they're not going to be afraid. They're not going to jump, run, hide from different kinds of stimulus. So that's something we can do that not every individual can. So there's always going to be a need for organizations like ours. There's 190 organizations like ours that are accredited across the United States and even more around the world. But we're still not meeting the need that's out there.
Representative Green or Senator Eichhorn, either one of you. How do you enforce this given the fact that there is not a government licensed, state or federal, for service animals? The dogs themselves aren't licensed. They can be trained, as Alan said, and by anyone who's, I guess, qualified to do it.
I think that the enforcement's going to have to start with the business or someone who brings a complaint that says this dog is being represented, but it attacked or misbehaved in public. And from what we've learned, the only way to really discover whether or not a dog is a service dog is by its actions. So if a dog is misbehaving or attacking, then obviously you have a problem, and then the complaint would have to be leveled against those people.
I don't know how much you looked at the other 20 states and their laws, but to your knowledge, has anyone ever been fined or sanctioned in any way for bringing in a fake service animal in any of your research on this?
I did not look into the fines. I only looked into the amount of states that did have the law in place. Haven't had a lot of pushback from anybody in the service dog area. So I'm guessing that they're all in favor of it, the ones who've contacted me. In fact, since the bill was introduced, we've gotten many contacts saying it's about time, thank you. So I think that just the fact that even if they can get the sticker on the door that says this is a crime, you can't bring a non-service dog in, will hopefully deter a lot of it. Senator Eichhorn?
Yep, and we got to wrap it up. This bill is going to be heard in committee in just a few minutes, so I want to again thank you all for coming here today. You can see how well behaved the dogs are that were up here today, and the powerful stories that those individuals shared with us, and for the true need for this legislation. So again, I look forward to carry this. Senator Rest and I are going to be presenting this bill very soon, and it's great to have this bipartisan working together. I mean, it's very important, and we're both very passionate about it. Everybody behind me right now is very passionate about this. So we look forward to getting this bill through and passed into the governor's desk, and look forward to continuing the discussion. So thank you again, and have a good afternoon, guys.